On a freezing night, an old man gave his last piece of bread to a hungry stranger, not knowing that one small act of kindness would completely change his life forever. But the biggest surprise came years later, when someone knocked on his door. In a small town where people were always busy chasing money and success, there lived an old man named Daniel. Daniel was 70 years old and lived alone in a tiny wooden house at the edge of the town. His house was old, his clothes were simple, and his pockets were almost always empty. But there was one thing Daniel had that many rich people had lost: a heart full of kindness. Every morning, Daniel woke up early, cleaned the small garden outside his house, and greeted everyone he met with a warm smile. The people in town often wondered how he could be so happy with so little. Some people said, "Daniel has nothing. Why does he smile so much?" But Daniel always replied, "Kindness is the one thing you can give away and still have more of." One cold winter evening, a heavy snowstorm hit the town. The streets became empty. The wind was so strong that even the strongest trees were shaking. Daniel sat near his small fireplace, looking at the only food he had left: a single piece of bread. It was supposed to be his dinner. He looked at it and smiled. "Enough for one more day," he whispered. Just as he was about to take his first bite, he heard a weak knock on his door. Knock, knock. Daniel stood up slowly and opened the door. Standing outside was a young man wearing a thin jacket. His face was pale, and he looked exhausted. "Sir," the young man said softly, "I'm sorry to bother you. I have been walking for hours. I lost my job. I have no money, and I haven't eaten anything today." The young man lowered his head. "I don't want to ask for much, just anything you can spare." Daniel looked behind him at the small table. His last piece of bread was there. For a moment, he thought about his empty stomach. He thought about the cold night. He thought about tomorrow. Then he picked up the bread and placed it in the young man's hands. "Take this," Daniel said. The young man looked shocked. "But sir, this is your dinner." Daniel smiled. "Yes, but tonight you need it more than I do." The young man's eyes filled with tears. "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me," Daniel answered. "Sometimes the people who need kindness the most are the ones we know the least." The young man ate the bread slowly, like it was the most valuable thing in the world. Before leaving, he asked, "Can I know your name?" "Daniel," he replied. The young man smiled. "I will never forget what you did for me." Daniel closed the door and went to sleep with an empty stomach, but a full heart. Years passed. The town changed. New buildings appeared. New people arrived. But Daniel remained the same. He still helped others. He still shared what little he had. One morning, Daniel woke up feeling weak. Age was catching up with him. He walked outside and sat on his old chair. He looked at his small garden and whispered, "I wonder if my kindness ever made a difference." At that exact moment, a black car stopped in front of his house. A young man stepped out. He was wearing a nice suit and looked successful. Daniel looked confused. The man walked toward him. "Excuse me, are you Daniel?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, I am." The man smiled. "You probably don't remember me." Daniel looked carefully at his face. Then suddenly, his eyes widened. "The young man from the snowstorm." The man smiled, with tears in his eyes. "Yes." Daniel stood up slowly. "I always wondered what happened to you." The young man looked at the old house. "I never forgot that night. You gave me your last meal when you had almost nothing. That night changed my life." Daniel listened quietly. The young man continued, "After leaving your house, I promised myself that if I ever became successful, I would become the kind of person you were. I worked hard. I built a company. I helped people. And today, I came back to find the man who taught me what kindness really means." Daniel smiled. "I didn't do anything special." The young man shook his head. "No, Daniel, you did something most people never do. You cared when nobody else cared." Then he handed Daniel an envelope. Daniel looked surprised. "What is this?" The young man replied, "A gift." Daniel opened it. Inside was enough money to repair his house, take care of his needs, and live comfortably. Daniel looked at him. "I cannot accept this." The young man smiled. "You gave me your last piece of bread. Please allow me to give you something back." Daniel's eyes became wet. For the first time in many years, he realized something. Kindness never disappears. Sometimes it travels through time. Sometimes it reaches places you never imagined. Sometimes the smallest act of love becomes someone else's reason to keep going. From that day on, Daniel's story spread throughout the town. People who once ignored kindness started helping others. Neighbors started checking on each other. Strangers started caring. And everyone learned one important lesson. You don't need to be rich to change someone's life. You don't need power. You don't need fame. Sometimes all it takes is a small act of kindness at the right moment. Because the world may forget the money you spend, but it will never forget the kindness you give. And somewhere, someone may be carrying a piece of your kindness for the rest of their life. The smallest light can shine the brightest in the darkest night.